Good evening, Madison. Thanks for coming out tonight. Wow. And welcome to Crime Adjacent Live. This is a tough one tonight, so let's get into it. A few days after the New Year's in 2020, 27-year-old Dorothy Strasberg called her sister, Lisa, with exciting news. One, her boss not only liked her idea of starting the company's own fashion brand, she put Dorothy in charge of it. Her own brand, just like that. It was a dream come true. And two, she had just met someone the night before at a bar around the corner from her fancy downtown apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dorothy said his name is Tim Hampton, and he's in finance at a big firm downtown. He's got a great smile, kind eyes, and my God, did they ever hit it off. He just listened intently all night long. Dorothy said she hadn't had a date like this in literally years. Usually, from her experience, the guys just talk and talk and talk, especially the guys in finance. Finance this, body metrics that, the fall of Rome, you name it. She'd heard it all. But Tim just listened and asked questions and seemed to want to know everything about Dorothy. Lisa Strasberg, Dorothy's sister, told Dateline later, "This was one of those phone calls I'll never forget. How good it all sounded, how happy she was. Everything really was truly going so well. But that's just Dorothy," I thought to myself. She made everything seem so easy and fun. You rooted for her. Dorothy Strasberg grew up in a quiet suburb just outside Charlotte. Her mom was a banker, and her dad worked in insurance. They were both driven, data-focused, expected big things from both their daughters, Dorothy and Lisa. Lisa took after her parents, math-oriented and logical to a T. She studied computer science and got 2 separate master's degrees from MIT, returning to Charlotte to work in her mom's firm and re-engineer their data collection services. She was a whiz. Dorothy got all the math parts of her family. She, too, went to MIT. But her wanderlust and carefree attitude and bubbly, cheery, adventurous persona was almost a shock to this quiet, logical family. Lisa recalled, "We'd go on family vacations and everyone around would get so excited when it rained because that meant endless rounds of Quirkle and Blockus and Scrabble. And Dorothy could do that and beat everyone, no question, but she also liked to go hiking in the rain or went to go jump in the lake. She was the happiest, most passionate person I've ever met." After MIT, Dorothy had been recruited by all the big consulting groups like Bain and McKinsey and had some offers from private equity firms. But Dorothy was also a huge follower of a woman named Melanie Johnson in her TikTok account, which had 50 million followers. Johnson was just a humble fashion student when she started this TikTok site, which told people how and where to buy clothes worn by celebrities at all these glamorous celebrity events. Johnson, like Dorothy, was mesmeric. You couldn't help but get caught up in the giddy excitement of Johnson's tone and smile and face. It was like a best friend inviting you into this voyeuristic celebrity world that you, too, could be a part of. Honestly, I follow her myself now. She's great. Johnson's account grew to the point that she started her own business there in Charlotte. And Dorothy, ever the adventurous spirit with a keen business acumen, she wanted in. Big time. She walked into Johnson's fledgling office downtown and said she could put her computer skills together with her own love of fashion and help grow this business. Indeed, in a few short years, Dorothy helped Johnson expand this business, and by 2019, she had a bright idea that would really, truly send this company over the top. Dorothy's plan was simple. Instead of pointing followers off-site to other brands, why doesn't Johnson start her own fashion line, like high-end celebrity knockoffs for cheap? Followers could get the look seen on all the social media channels, but for a fraction of the price, and Johnson would reap all the benefits of this. Johnson was all in from the moment Dorothy mentioned it in early 2020. Smiling at the memory in her interview, Johnson told Dateline, "I remember this meeting because Dorothy had 4 million charts and graphs and a presentation that would blow your mind. But honestly, between you and me, the moment Dorothy walked into my office, I was already a yes. Whatever it was, if Dorothy was in charge of it, you knew it would be a hit. This business would not have become the empire it is without her. No way." So that first bit of news Dorothy told Lisa during that phone call in January 2020, that was the fashion line plan. The second bit was about Tim, this new guy she had met on the very night she went out to celebrate her business win and plan for this new fashion line. Lisa said, "She was smitten. You could tell, and I was so happy for her. And honestly, if he was good enough for her, well, he was good enough for me. I was excited for her." Little did she know, of course, that this new love interest would be the beginning of a long, slow, unstoppable tragedy happening in plain sight. It was the starting point of what femicide expert and crime analyst host Laura Richards calls a murder in slow motion. Because that's exactly what happened to Dorothy, despite endless amounts of money and help and even desperate escape plans enacted by her family and friends. Okay, profilers, let's dive straight into this case because we all need to be aware of these signs and what we can do to protect the ones we love most. Live from Madison, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent. The first time Dorothy introduced Tim Hampton to her sister Lisa, Lisa could tell straight away why Dorothy was so smitten. Like I said, Dorothy and Tim met at a bar in downtown Charlotte in January 2020, and Tim didn't hesitate. He wanted to meet her sister, Lisa, straight away. Dorothy was always talking about how Lisa was her best friend in the world, and Tim was eager to meet. Lisa told Dateline, "He made quite the impression. You could practically feel his presence." Lisa said Tim was handsome, for sure, but sort of casual. He wasn't like the button-up finance guys she knew with their saggy slacks and flannel vests, the uniform of the fintech crowd. Tim was what Dorothy described as rugged, outdoorsy. That night, the first night, Lisa bought into it, she said. Dorothy was so excited. Lisa said later in her interview, "But honestly, my first impression was sort of slovenly. Like you could tell his pants and shirt were dirty. It didn't read as rugged, but he was, just as Dorothy said, a good listener and very charming. I'll give him that." Tim, aged 37 at the time and 10 years older than Dorothy, bought drinks and had appetizers whisked to the table. He leaned into Lisa and said he wanted to know everything about her, yes, but also about Dorothy as a child. Lisa told Dateline, "It was a fun night, for sure, and I admit I could see straight away why Dorothy was so smitten. He makes you feel so special." So February 2020 turned into March, and now it was time to meet the parents, Keith and Lois Strasberg. Lisa said, "You could tell they had already developed their own secret language. Like a couple, they had secrets. But there was just something off. I couldn't put my finger on it." That evening went well, just as well as Lisa's first meeting. But she could tell Dorothy was feeling more and more stressed. A new relationship, meeting the parents, her big deal at work, and getting a fashion line off the ground. Lisa just assumed Dorothy was feeling the weight of everything. And here's Tim, sitting on the couch, stroking her hair and making these secret in-jokes. "Oh, she's too busy for me. I don't know how she does it." On the surface, it sounded like a compliment. But Lisa said there was just something underneath it all, something she wouldn't place. Not until later. March rolled into April, and Lisa said calls between Dorothy and her became less and less frequent. They used to talk every day, sometimes twice a day. Those calls turned to texts, and even those, by May, started to dwindle. Lisa said she actually went over to Dorothy's apartment to check on her, like, "What's up?" And she was met at the door by Tim, who sort of stood there, blocking her way, but whispering, gently. He had a good story. Dorothy had been working so much, 22 hours a day. She just got home from a trip to Ohio to check in on the fashion brand third-party manufacturer and was asleep. Could Lisa come back later? Tim asked. Tim told her, "You know how she is, ignoring everything and everyone for her career, but she means well." And Lisa just stood there, confused and shocked, really. Ohio? How did Lisa not even know Dorothy had traveled? They usually talked and laughed about all their airport anxieties. And then there was another one of those comments that felt weighted somehow. Like there was a compliment on the surface, "She's a hard worker," but a subtle dig underneath, "She ignores people." And then another compliment, "Ish, she means well." It was another tiny dig and a compliment sandwich. That's not the Dorothy Lisa knew. No way. She didn't ignore people. Her sister, her family, anyone. In her interview with Dateline, Lisa took a long moment to keep going. "I wish," she said, "I wish I had busted through that door and kicked Tim out. That was my first instinct. I could tell something was off, but then I felt crazy for even thinking about it." Besides, Dorothy called the next day with big news. Tim and Dorothy were moving in together. This was late May 2020, and remember, Tim and Dorothy had just met after New Year's that year in January. Dorothy said they were not just moving in together, but moving out of Charlotte altogether. They were moving about 45 miles south to Oaksburg, a more rural town where she and Tim could get a plot of land and raise chickens and get dogs, Tim's big dream. Chickens, Lisa remembered thinking to herself. Dorothy loved the Charlotte nightlife, an art scene and bars and restaurants, and enjoying the live-work functionality of an urban center. Her family was there, her job, everything. Lisa recalled just how much Dorothy gushed about being able to walk to work. So, chickens? Lisa said, "It just all seemed to be happening so fast, like my baby sister was in a rushing stream, drifting along, and I just couldn't reach her." But according to Dorothy, it all made sense. Remember, this is 2020, and by May and June, most of corporate America was working from home because of the pandemic. According to Dorothy, Tim said they could both work from home in Oaksburg and escape all the worry and fear of urban life and illness for a life in the country with land and animals together. On the plus side, Lisa thought maybe she'd see Dorothy more, even if she had moved. After all, they could get together now, work from home, work from anywhere. But Dorothy reported that Tim said they needed to be safe. Everyone should stay home in their own bubble so they didn't infect each other with COVID. It was for everyone's safety, Tim said. "We need to keep Dorothy safe," he said. Lisa told Dateline, "Looking back, it was the perfect cover. COVID. When Dorothy moved out to Oaksburg with Tim, he now had total control. It sounded like an idyllic country life away from the hustle and bustle, but this was merely the start of what turned out to be a slow-speed trap closing around her." Dorothy called or texted occasionally as the months rolled on and 2020 turned into 2021. Yes, she was happy. Work was going well. It was difficult to do everything via Zoom, but she figured this will pass. Dorothy maintained her bright, hopeful demeanor. But Lisa said dark notes crept in every now and then. This was Dorothy's first big-time, long-term move-in relationship, and she knew her older sister, Lisa, had a similar relationship in the past that just didn't work out. So occasionally, Dorothy would ask her sister about how it's all supposed to go. Like, is this normal? Is it normal to have to tell your partner why you're going out and where? Is it normal to have to check in via text when you're out? Is it normal to share your location and to expect a phone call if you deviate from your stated route? "No," Lisa said, horrified. "That's not normal at all, not in a trusting relationship anyway." Hearing this, Lisa immediately booked a dinner at Dorothy's house. She insisted. There was no question. Dorothy tried to say that they were busy, that Tim said it was fine, but maybe just at a later day, when Dorothy wasn't so stressed about work. But Lisa wouldn't have it. Her instincts told her to get to Oaksburg. Now, something felt off. And when she gets there, it's actually quite pleasant. The small one-bedroom house was a little more cluttered than she knew Dorothy liked. She was a clean freak who needed a neat, tidy space to do her work. Lisa noticed that all of Tim's stuff just sort of encroached everywhere. It was hard to find a place to sit and relax. Tim said they were still adjusting. 2 apartments crammed into one small one-bedroom. They'd clean up and make room once they got settled, he said. Lisa said she sat there thinking they'd been living together for a year by this point. It didn't take that long to settle. And then Tim said, smiling, "You know Dorothy, always too busy for anything else." And Lisa sat there wondering, did she know Dorothy? The Dorothy she knew was never too busy for anything else. She was carefree and happy, not jumpy and shy as she seemed that night. Dorothy seemed understated, speaking as if for approval from Tim, not just speaking her mind as she usually did. It was an odd dinner, Lisa remembered. Nothing bad happened, no obvious red flags, but it just felt off. This marked the first time Lisa told her parents that Dorothy might need help, that something might be wrong. Her parents, Keith and Lois, admitted they hadn't seen or really chatted with Dorothy for a bit. But she was in a grown-up relationship now and didn't need her parents intervening. As far as they knew, Dorothy was busy at work and happy at home, and they didn't want to meddle. Besides, it wasn't like she had bruises on her face or anything. She wasn't being abused. Lisa was perhaps making a big deal over this. Maybe, they said, and this was a particular dagger in the whole situation. Maybe Lisa was jealous. So Lisa let it go. Maybe her parents were right. There wasn't really any sign of abuse that she could tell. So it continued like this for several more months into the summer of 2021. Fewer calls, fewer texts, no more dinners, just a separateness between Dorothy and her family. Dorothy's work issued back-to-work orders, and while the rest of the crew happily rejoined Melanie Johnson and Charlotte, Dorothy asked for more time at home. The new dogs, the chickens, they had gone a little bananas during the height of COVID, and she needed to get things settled first. Besides, Tim had gone back to work at his financial firm, and he liked to have dinner on the table when he got home. Dorothy said they were both enjoying their life out in the rural parts of North Carolina. She'd return to the office soon, she promised. Melanie Johnson told Dateline, "Maybe it seemed weird that my star employee didn't want to return to the business I know she loved, but she was still getting everything all set up. From the outside, everything looked fine." Melanie said Dorothy didn't just get everything done, all set up. She created a sensation, a fledgling fashion label of her own. Any stress and worry Melanie noted in Zoom calls was probably just from the stress of creating this new fashion brand from scratch. She worried about Dorothy, but again, things seemed to be rolling along. No red flags for her either. Everything changed on the morning of August 9th, 2021. Lisa got a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. At first, Lisa thought it was a spam number and was about to block it, but her instinct said no. Answer it. Listen, this is important. Indeed, it was. On the other end of this call, Dorothy was crying. She could barely catch her breath. Dorothy said she had managed to, quote, escape the house for an hour when Tim went to Charlotte on a work errand and left her alone. Escape, Lisa thought. That's an odd word. The phone call got worse from there. Dorothy said she had saved up a bit of cash, like spare change, to secretly buy a burner phone from the gas station in Oaksburg. Saved up? Spare change? Dorothy was earning more than Lisa at this point. Money should not have been an issue. Why didn't she just use her credit card, some cash? And why was she buying a burner phone? Dorothy said she only had a minute to talk, but she thinks she needs help. She thinks she's going crazy. She can't tell what's right from wrong anymore, what's okay and what's not. She said she and Tim had gotten into a big fight the night before. Actually, they had gotten into more and more fights recently. Tim said Dorothy wasn't pulling her weight around the house, had really let the place go. Had really let herself go, he said. Lisa remembered that it was mostly Tim's stuff all over the house, and this all struck her as odd. But it turns out this was just fight number 1 out of 700. Dorothy wasn't good with money. Tim would handle the finances. Dorothy's family was neglecting her. They never called, never came over. They had abandoned her. Tim never would. They didn't love her anymore. Tim did, like no one else ever would. Only Tim really knew her, really loved her. Lisa told Dateline, "I was squeezing the phone at this point to the point of breaking it. This was all so backward. It was Tim who didn't want visitors. It was Tim who didn't want her to call people. I wanted to shout." The more Lisa listened, the more she realized Dorothy was in trouble. Real bad trouble. Just the previous night, Tim prevented Dorothy from leaving a room. He blocked her way, practically egging Dorothy to respond violently. Then, he put her hands on her. Lisa said that was it, the final straw. I heard this and told Dorothy I would come get her, right that second. She'd never see him again. But Dorothy declined. She said, "No, don't come." She just needed to hear her sister. She needed to understand that no, this was not normal, that no, her family had not abandoned her, and that no, she was not going crazy. Dorothy said to wait. If she fled like that right then and there, Tim would follow. and things would be bad. They'd get worse. They made a plan to speak the next day. Dorothy ended up hiding this burner phone in the chicken coop, which she actually liked and Tim despised, despite it being Tim's idea in the first place. Dorothy told Lisa later that it felt like having a lifeline to reality, this burner phone, and her sister. During these illicit phone calls hiding among the chickens, Dorothy said it was Tim's idea to move to Oaksburg. It was Tim's idea to work from home, even if she could and wanted to return to Charlotte. It was Tim's cunning and strategizing to isolate Dorothy from her work friends and family and from the life she knew and loved in Charlotte. Dorothy said one time, "It was quite shocking, really, when you look back on it. I was the proverbial frog in a pot of boiling water, just sitting there, watching it all get worse and worse around me. I didn't know what to do or who to trust, even myself." Thankfully, Lisa acted fast. She told her parents everything, and they got to work fast. First, the parents hired a private eye who dug into Tim's past. It was everything they feared. Tim Hampton wasn't a rising star in the finance business of Charlotte, something all the Strasbergs knew well. He was a con man and a felon. Tim was actually legally named Thomas, not Timothy. And he had been arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 30 days in county jail for assault and rape of a former relationship partner. Yes, 30 days for rape and a felony conviction. The private eye dug up the sentencing transcript in which the judge called him a, quote, promising young man with a bright future who made a simple mistake. His victim, a 19-year-old woman, was in the hospital for 2 weeks after this attack. Tim never went to college for his fancy finance degree. That was forged and faked, and no, he didn't work in finance at all. He dabbled in cryptocurrency, but more or less scammed people out of small sums of crypto to get by. In fact, when the private eye was able to get a look at his finances, she saw that Tim, or Tom, I guess, had managed to funnel all of Dorothy's paychecks into his own accounts, which he then used to buy this coin or that coin on illicit foreign crypto markets that were not legal in the United States. In short, he had control over all her finances and was quickly losing whatever she earned. It was bad, the private eye said. It didn't surprise her that Dorothy had to, quote, save to buy a simple $40 burner phone. She had been isolated, controlled, and was now essentially trapped in a prison out in Oaksburg on threat of violence. Hearing all this, Lisa and her parents set in motion a plan straight out of a Hollywood movie. They rented a top-floor apartment in the securest building they could find in downtown Charlotte. They moved in clothes, toiletries, everything they could imagine Dorothy might need to start over. They even contacted Dorothy's boss, Melanie, for help. She, too, had noticed a change in Dorothy over the past few months. Well, more changes, worse changes. Dorothy refused to come in, refused to say why. At first, it was fine, considering the new fashion label was going well. But deadlines were missed, and travel had to be made to check on factories and suppliers, and Dorothy always had an excuse for why she couldn't go, or even come back in to talk about it. Melanie told Dateline, "It suddenly made so much sense, why she missed so much work. I wish I had noticed this." Together with Lisa and her parents, Melanie was incensed, hearing all these details of what was really happening. Whatever Dorothy needed, she would get, no questions asked, Melanie said. And this was perfect because they did, indeed, need Melanie's help. The day of escape was planned for a Friday in October 2021. Melanie would call Dorothy and insist on a meeting in person in Charlotte. Either Dorothy gets to this meeting or she's fired. At first, Tim told her to blow it off. They needed Dorothy more than Dorothy needed them, he said. But as rehearsed, Dorothy said this was a major threat to her pay. She needed that job to keep them afloat, something Tim knew well considering he was basically living completely off Dorothy by this point and blowing through whatever she made. "Fine," he said, "I'll drive you." This was planned too. Melanie actually hired security and fake paparazzi for this next part. She told Dorothy to meet her at Frank's Tavern and Restaurant, a block away from the office, for a secret meeting with an unnamed celebrity who wanted to invest in their fashion label. This was a big meeting. There would be security and lawyers and the press outside, and if Dorothy missed it, she was done for. So Tim rolls up to Frank's and actually tries to go in with Dorothy. Like, look at me, swaggering in with your star employee to meet with celebrities. They knew this would happen too. No doubt, Tim would not let Dorothy escape his gaze. Hence, the security. They checked Dorothy's ID at the door as if it was all official and secret, like a movie premiere. And then they checked Tim's ID and held him outside, in the front. This was it, the moment of escape. Tim remained out front, sulking in his car. He told security that he refused to move the car. His partner was a big deal, and don't they know who they're messing with? Security didn't argue. They let him just sit there in the white parking zone out front to sulk and pout. Fine, go for it, they said. This was actually so perfect, because there was no meeting, no celebrity, no lawyers. Inside, Melanie and Lisa met Dorothy, whisked her through the kitchen and out of the back door into an alley where an SUV met her with her parents and the private eye, Alexa Ling. Alexa took Dorothy's phone and smashed it. Then she made Dorothy undress down to her underwear and change clothes. They dumped the broken phone and the old clothes in the alley and sped away. Alexa watched through the back window, making sure they weren't being tailed, while Dorothy's dad, Keith, sped away. In the back seat, Dorothy looked more nervous than she ever had in her entire life. She was shaking. Lisa held her hands. They all held their breath. Keith Strasberg, in charge of the getaway car, told Dateline he stayed up all night, practicing this route so many times he had to refuel twice. He said he also learned the fastest routes to the nearby police precinct, just in case Tim got wise and followed them. Keith told Dateline, "I feel like I failed my daughter by not noticing everything that was happening, like Lisa did, but I wasn't going to fail her again." They sped past the police department. They passed by a big park. Still, no glimpse of Tim in the rear view. Alexa Ling got on the phone with the security guard back at Frank's Tavern. She said Tim was still there, parked outside, while Melanie and a whole team of employees were still mad at work inside, pretending to be involved in a big celebrity meeting. The ruse worked. The coast is clear, Alexa said. It was time to go to Dorothy's new home. After more than a year of being trapped and slowly isolated from her family, and after the first bits of physical violence had begun, Dorothy Strasberg was free.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
As her dad pulled the SUV into the secure underground parking garage of this new apartment, this new life, Dorothy began to sob. They all did. Keith handed the keys to a waiting valet and another security guard, and then they all headed upstairs to the 17th floor, where there were cameras everywhere, including on Dorothy's front door. Lisa said they all started to cheer once they got inside the apartment and locked the 4 bolts behind them. And then they started to cry again. Lisa told Dateline, "It might have seemed like a little much, I know, like we were being overly dramatic, but seeing how scared Dorothy was, it didn't feel like it at the time. It felt like freedom. Finally." Profilers, I hate to break it to you, but they weren't being dramatic enough, because Dorothy's personal hell was just beginning. As you know from previous nerd outs on previous episodes, there is all sorts of research about breakups being a particularly fraught and violent time for women. The CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey says half of women will encounter domestic violence in their lifetimes, in the form of sexual assault or other physical violence or stalking. Half. Following a landmark 2003 study of violence against women, nurse and researcher Jacqueline C. Campbell created the renowned danger assessment that highlights risk factors for women when it comes to violence committed by their male partners. Dorothy lit up this assessment. Abuse, forced sex, isolation, controlling behavior, and now, following this moment of freedom, a breakup. This is, for many men, too many men, the moment of perceived humiliation and loss of control turns to violent rage, ending in homicide. It happens all the time, too many times. Dorothy's case fits neatly into what esteemed former Scotland Yard investigator and now the Crime Analyst podcast host Laura Richards calls a murder in slow motion. This case is practically a model of coercive control in action. The sudden, super-fast romance and love bombing, followed by the long, slow isolation, physically, financially, mentally. The controlling behaviors, the compliments that seem double-edged, the boundary testing, the stalking, and then the physical abuse. Richards tells us it would never be one thing on its own, but the pattern of all of these behaviors accumulating. Lisa Strasberg knew all this and did something incredibly smart on this Friday, the day of Dorothy's escape. Through the family's hired lawyers, they rushed to court that day and asked for an emergency order of protection against Tim. If granted, he wouldn't be able to contact her, phone her, knock on her door, barely even look at her. And they got it, straight away, at least on a temporary emergency basis. Dorothy and her family felt another sigh of relief that day. Not only was she physically free from Tim, but now there was a court order that he couldn't break under penalty of arrest. But the thing is, these types of emergency restraining orders need to be made permanent at some point, or at least for longer stretches, like a year or 2, or sometimes even 5, depending on the situation. And a judge ordered a hearing where both parties get to tell their side of the story, and then the judge rules. This all happened on Monday, following this first weekend of freedom. Lisa said, "It was a weird, strange weekend. On the one hand, she was free, but on the other, there was this impending hearing. What if they didn't believe her?" Lisa was right to worry. Both Dorothy and Tim settled into different sides of a sealed family courtroom in Charlotte and got just a few minutes each to tell their side of the story. Dorothy's lawyers laid out their evidence, all of it, everything they found. Then, it was Tim's turn. And Tim got to question Dorothy herself, which feels to me like a horrible betrayal of the system, letting an abuser question and antagonize the very people they abuse. Tim tried his best to paint their relationship as good, and all of this hullabaloo, as he called it, was just a giant misunderstanding. He urged couples counseling so they could work it out. The judge ultimately didn't agree to this. Counseling, that was up to them. But he did ultimately rule to not allow the restraining order to remain. Tim had won. The judge urged him not to contact Dorothy if she didn't want to, which she reiterated she did not want him to. But there would be no legal barrier preventing him from doing so. The judge said, quote, "This sounds like a big misunderstanding, and I'm not going to put something on this man's record." This sounded almost verbatim to the judge who sentenced Tim to just a month in jail for felony rape charges. You can't mar this man's record. It was horrifying. If there is any possible upside to this hearing and the judge's ruling, it's that the bailiffs made Tim stay behind for 15 minutes so Dorothy and her family and her lawyers could clear out first and head to their SUV, which they quickly drove to her new apartment. Tim was then allowed to leave. This is standard procedure in these cases. So the hearing clearly didn't go as they liked, but at least Dorothy was safe in her apartment. Tim didn't know where she lived at this point. And Melanie gave Dorothy full permission to work from home as much or as long as she liked. Lisa transported groceries and toiletries while Dorothy remained safely ensconced in her secure tower apartment. She was free, yes, finally, but she couldn't leave without fear of running into Tim somewhere. Somehow, Dorothy knew he would be out there, looking for her. She felt as if she had exchanged one quasi-prison in Oaksburg for another in this nice apartment with a view of downtown Charlotte. And it remained like this for 2 weeks. That's when the letters began arriving. Tim, not a complete idiot, never made actual threats in these letters, nothing he could be held legally liable for. But they all sounded exactly like the underhanded compliments he frequently used on Dorothy. There was subtext to them. Dorothy, I'm brokenhearted that you made up such unbelievable things, and I realize it's just the stress you've been under, but I know you mean well. So please reconsider this grave error you made and consider the feelings of others who are also put under stress by your actions. Lisa kept these letters. She wanted to burn them, of course. She wanted to vomit. But she also knew they might be needed as evidence someday. She could see where this was heading. But the wording wasn't the worst part. The absolute bonkers, bananas pants ramblings of a clear narcissist. No. The worst part is that these letters had been slipped under Dorothy's own door. How? How did Tim find out where she lived, and how on earth did Tim manage to get inside this apartment tower to stand at her door and slip letters underneath? But the thing is, he didn't. Remember, this place has surveillance cameras galore, and Dorothy even had a Ring camera installed on her own front door. They never found footage of Tim inside her apartment hallway. But they did see images of Dorothy's neighbor directly across the hall, slipping these envelopes under her door. This neighbor, a woman named Emily Belafonte, was filmed 27 times, slipping 27 letters under Dorothy's door in a 3-week period in late 2021. Dorothy was too freaked out and scared to go over and knock, like, what the fuck are you doing? Stop. Also, you're in danger. But Lisa wasn't scared. One afternoon in November 2021, she doesn't remember the exact day, she sees another letter, sees her sister is clearly distraught, and she marches over, knocks on Emily's door, and guess who answers? Tim Hampton himself. He's there, smile just as big as can be, as if he expected this, was proud to have engineered this moment. But Lisa can sense he's momentarily disappointed, as if he expected Dorothy, not Lisa. This is the super maddening thing about this case. All of this entire conversation is overheard on Dorothy's Ring camera. It's just recording the whole time. You can hear Lisa say, "What the hell? What's the deal with these letters? They need to stop and you need to leave." And you can hear Tim, I kid you not, saying Lisa needs to leave him alone, to stop harassing him. He's with a new woman now, Lisa, and he doesn't appreciate being harassed by the sister of a crazy ex. And you can then see Tim literally peek behind Lisa's shoulder, take a long look at the Ring camera on Dorothy's door, and then smile, just like one of those shit-eating, smug, I can get away with anything smiles. Standing there, Lisa is in shock. She knows from all her research, and she did a ton on behalf of her sister, about Darvo and the horrible ways controlling abusers like this try to dominate others. Darvo is short for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender, which is exactly what was happening here, a reverse Uno, basically. Tim was literally having his new, quote, girlfriend slip countless letters under Dorothy's door, and when confronted about it, says he's the one being harassed, and if Lisa wasn't careful, he'd take out a restraining order on her. It was insanity. Lisa never actually got to talk to Emily that day, the neighbor, or really ever, and she wondered if Emily herself wasn't in need of help, just like Dorothy. Like, did they need to plan a day of freedom for her as well? But what really got Lisa wondering wasn't that Tim was there, across the hallway from Dorothy, but how? How did he track her down? And would Dorothy ever be able to truly escape this guy? There's no real way to prove this, but the family's best hunch was that someone, either Lisa or her mother or father, or perhaps even work colleagues of Dorothy's, someone was staked out by Tim, and then he followed them there, to this apartment, discovering this was her new home. They didn't put it past him, all the hours it must have taken to stake out her friends and family just to see if he could cause endless, ongoing emotional damage, his real aim. They assumed that Emily was just a pawn to get as close as possible to Dorothy. Emily declined to comment for this story. saying she is trying to put everything behind her and forget all about Tim and Dorothy and what would soon happen in that apartment building. But however it happened, however Tim found her, they all agreed Dorothy needed out again, and fast, and honestly, her family was happy to do it. Tim was clearly a crazy person hell-bent on stalking and harassment and abuse. And how do I say this? Money just wasn't a thing for this family of finance whizzes and bankers. If Dorothy needed to flee the country, they could do that, repeatedly. And Lisa says yes, they actually thought about it. That's how bad it was, and how little protection they felt they were receiving from law enforcement and the courts. Lisa told Dateline, "I wish we had done it, actually. I investigated apartments in Paris, the fashion capital of the world. We were actually so close at one point to just saying, screw it, let's all move there." But first, in December 2021, after this confrontation over the letters, the family applied for another restraining order, saying Tim was stalking his ex-girlfriend by moving in across the hallway from her with another woman. Like, come on, this is obvious, he won't let her be. He's slipping letters under her door. The judge, the same judge, Judge Michael Ellington, for the record, total jerk, denied this emergency order. It didn't even pass round one, which would have granted Dorothy at least a few days of peace until a more permanent hearing was held like the last time. The judge said Tim is an adult and can see any new girlfriend he wants, and what job was it of the courts to decide he can't see a new love interest just because she happened to live next door to an old one? Maybe, the judge actually said this, with his own mouth, maybe Dorothy was jealous, the same thing Tim had said to Lisa. This case, I swear, reading through all these documents and failures, it's giving me an aneurysm. So after this failed court hearing, while the family and Dorothy were making plans to move out of the apartment into another one, Tim was right there, watching the whole thing, sometimes with the door open. Lisa told Dateline, "Can you imagine the guy you're trying to escape from just standing there, watching you escape, and smiling the whole time like he enjoyed his power over you?" Indeed, this is part of it. The control and power these coercive controllers have over their victims, taking joy in seeing the pain they're inflicting on others. Lisa said, "The hardest part was just feeling, in your gut, how this would all play out, and there was nothing you could do to stop it. How is this a way to live, whether it's Dorothy or anyone else, feeling like you're trapped in a prison because of one guy? Dorothy had every possible resource in the world, and then nothing helped. No one helped." The call the family had been dreading for the past year came on January 2nd, 2022. Melanie Johnson said Dorothy had not checked into a Zoom meeting, which was odd. She quite literally never did that. Lisa texted and then called and called again. Finally, she drove over to the apartment, which, crazy as it sounds, was in the exact same apartment building Tim lived in. Honestly, it seemed like a good plan and just shows the lengths the family had to go to escape this guy. On the day Tim was standing there in the doorway watching Dorothy and her family move, they made a big show of packing things into another black SUV and whisking Dorothy through town, hoping Tim wouldn't follow. When in reality, the family simply moved Dorothy into another apartment 4 stories below her previous one, hoping Tim would simply believe she was elsewhere and eventually he'd just leave the apartment building himself. Of course, this necessitated Dorothy basically living 24/7 inside her new apartment. No trips to the store, or the apartment gym, or work, or anything that might bring her into contact with her stalker and abuse her. Another glittering prison. Lisa said, "We had a good talk about this plan, and ultimately it was Dorothy who shrugged and said, 'It doesn't matter where I am. I'll always be in fear of this guy, hoping he never finds me.'" And indeed, on January 2nd, he found her. When Lisa got the call from Melanie and tried to contact Dorothy, she eventually made her way back to the new apartment, driving in circles and looking for any sign that Tim was following her. He wasn't, of course. He had already accomplished exactly what he wanted. When Lisa got to Dorothy's apartment on that day, January 2nd, she saw the door was open. It had been broken, splintered at the lock, and a big shoe print on the door. Lisa's heart dropped. She had always known how this would end. Not just feared, like an anxious possibility, but sort of a cruel knowing. And here it was, the day it all arrived. Dorothy was found in the kitchen. She was still in her nightclothes, as if surprised in the middle of the night. She had been strangled and then stabbed 425 times in the chest and neck and face. In an extra show of control and humiliation, Tim wrote all sorts of hateful, misogynistic comments around her body. In her own blood. Bitch, whore, slut, bossy, which, Jesus, I don't even know. Then he went to her workstation and broke every computer and photo and work item involving her beloved fashion line. I can say Tim with authority here, and no threat of litigation, because it was, indeed, of course, Tim who murdered her. It was captured on video, breaking into the apartment at 5:30 a.m. that day, and then on the home video surveillance cameras Dorothy had installed inside. Tim busted down the door in one kick. Dorothy emerged from the bedroom, poking her head into the kitchen to see what had happened. She rubbed her eyes once. There was a momentary calm, and then Tim was upon her. Afterward, Tim went back to Emily Belafonte's apartment 4 floors up and simply waited for the cops. In what amounted to a confession, Tim claimed self-defense through emotional harassment. I kid you not. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. That's what he told the cops. He claimed he moved not once, but twice to escape Dorothy, who remained in the apartment building to stay close to Tim. In fact, he said Dorothy and her whole family had harassed and warned his new girlfriend, Emily, that Tim was a bad guy. How dare they? In his first interrogation, Tim showed no remorse and in fact rationalized why he had to murder her. All this harassment, it sent him over the edge. He said he felt like he couldn't escape. He told Charlotte detectives, quote, Dorothy wanted me back, and no matter how many times I told her we were done, she wouldn't take no for an answer. This felt like the only way out. The jury, thankfully, didn't buy it. There was a trial in 2023, and on June 3rd, 2023, Tim was convicted of second-degree murder. It didn't feel like justice, Lisa said. Justice would have looked like simply being able to leave a relationship and move on without fear of death haunting you for years, or for the courts and police to realize what harassment and stalking and coercive control actually looked like. No, Lisa said. The jury's decision just looked like the final act in a slow-moving play with an end they already knew was coming. Dorothy was dead the moment she decided to leave Tim, and everything that came afterward was just checking off the appropriate social scripts along the way. Stalking, check. No help from the system, check. A murder everyone knew was coming but couldn't stop, check. A confession, a trial, a verdict, check, check, check. What did it even matter? Lisa wondered. Dorothy shouted from the rooftops that this man would kill her one day. She knew it in her bones, lived in fear for years. Was a verdict confirming all this supposed to help? There was one more box to check, and Lisa had another gut feeling about how this would all go. She told Dateline, after a while, you just sort of give up. Like you can tell nothing is going to happen. In August 2023, there was a sentencing hearing. Lisa and her parents and even Melanie Johnson got to give victim impact statements and ask for harsh sentencing. They were already angry it was a conviction for second-degree murder, not first, as that would have required a longer sentence. Freedom from Tim. For all of them. So they continued to expect the worst, even though they were hoping secretly for more. Lisa told the court she worried for other women, like Emily, who might fall into Tim's isolation and abuse tactics and never be able to escape, just like Dorothy. Tim also got to speak and told the court basically what he told detectives and the jury. Dorothy wouldn't leave him alone, no matter his attempts to flee. He didn't know what else to do. How sad it was that Dorothy had derailed his new and promising career as a financial advisor in the crypto sector. Would prison solve anything, he asked? Was it fair to lock someone up 24/7 in a small cell and make them fear for their life when they're just trying to move on from an abusive situation? That's what he said. That's what he told the judge. Lisa told Dateline, "I didn't even have the power in me to drop my jaw when he said this." He was protesting the exact same thing Dorothy had to do to escape him. At this point, I didn't have any hope for a just outcome, whatever that was. Indeed, in the end, the judge sentenced Tim to 5 years in prison, with the promise of a diversionary program for abuse victims after 2 years. As of 2026, Tim has since been moved into this diversionary program, which allows him to take classes and counseling during the day while sleeping in a group home situation at night. This ends next year, when he will be free on parole for the next 3 years anyway. Melanie continued to grow the fashion line after hiring 3 new people to take over for Dorothy. In an interview, Melanie shook her head and smiled. "We pulled in $20 million in the first year with projections of $100 million a year in just 2 years. Dorothy knew exactly what she was doing, what this fashion line would do." Lisa said there's no bright spot coming, no comfort to be taken from any of this. I'll let her end this story. Lisa said, "It felt like one of those bad dreams you couldn't wake from, like you're just being chased and you know you're going to be caught and there's nothing you can do to stop it, and everyone around you just watches, casually, shrugging, like none of it is a big deal, when in reality, it's a slow-speed murder playing out right before your eyes." Thank you so much for coming out tonight, Madison. These cases are tough and horrifying, and I'm glad we can talk about them together, if for no other reason than to know what to look for. As you may have noticed, Nikki is on the hunt again. Thanks for your tips. Please keep them coming. I will be in the merch line all night, so come say hi. I'd love to chat. And we will see you in Duluth next week for another case you simply will not believe. Until next time, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent.